Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics, and today I want to look at this book. It's called Gods in Darkness, The Complete Novels of Cain, written by two-time World Fantasy Award winner Karl Wagner. And the reason why I want to talk about it is because I just picked it up. It has the three novels, complete novels of Cain, Bloodstone, Dark Crusade, and Darkness Weaves. Now, Darkness Weaves was originally published, as some people may not know, in 1970 by a company called Powell Publications. And I'll show you a copy of the novel right here so you can see. And in that novel, it was much shorter than the novel that he subsequently rewrote and republished in 1978, simply titled Darkness Weaves. Now, the writer, of course, Karl Edward Wagner, lived between December 12th, 1945, and he died on October 14th, 1994, at the age of 49, from what people think is from alcoholism. Anyway, the writer Wagner left us too soon. He was a brilliant writer. He knew how to tell a good story. He is a master storyteller, much in the vein of Robert Louis Stevenson and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and so on, H.G. Wells. A good writer, a good storyteller. And in the first novel in the book, which I read over the holidays, by the way, Bloodstone, we're right away introduced to the main character, Cain, who's sitting by a campfire, basically, with a bunch of thieves and reavers who have just looted some town property and are basically dividing the spoils of their loot. And among the spoils is this ring, and Cain right away says he wants the ring and nothing else. Well, that starts a conflict and with the group, and it's for you, the reader, to know what happens next. Anyway, suffice it to say, Cain ends up with the ring. Cain realizes that the ring has a connection to some ancient alien race that had established itself in an old city covered by swampland and forest called Arilarti. And Cain works again, as in Darkness Weaves, for himself. He works both sides with clever acumen, but what makes the story intriguing, with all Cain's clever stratagems, the writer Wagner indicates how true to form his main character is. I won't say more than that, lest I deliver a spoiler. There's plenty of action in the first story, intriguing character development, especially with the lead characters, Cain, Terrace, Malchion, and Drybeck. Drybeck in particular is of interest because Drybeck also is an enlightened and informed, cultured man. He's well read. And it's one of the ways, because Cain, who's lived probably over 1,000 years, Cain also is cultured and well read. And he knows how to, by those means, get into a relationship with Drybeck. So the lead antagonists, as I said, are well developed. There's a group of toadmen called the Ryliti, and they're like frog-like beings from vestiges of this alien old race that existed in these maybe even pre-dawn times. It conveys a kind of pessimistic view of being and the evolution of beings, put it in those terms. And that was brought about by ignorance and lost knowledge, lost knowing from their previous ancestors. So Wagner brings all the horror of this fantasy world to the fore with lurid and vivid descriptions. There's long and well described and fantastically epic battle scenes. They're very accurately described, so the reader is constantly aware of what's going to happen based on what he's describing in the story. Cain is more like a hero in the story, despite literally scenes of where people get stabbed in the back. But I'll leave it to the reader to make that decision. One can argue, one can see how these scenes of sword and sorcery with strong elements of science fiction, they're pretty evident, especially when he's describing this elder race. And you can see elements of what I would call H.P. Lovecraft, especially when you read about this elder ancient race and so on. By and large, all in all, the first novel, Bloodstone, is an excellent read. As you can see here, you can see the complete Gods in Darkness. Gods in Darkness is a reference to a passage in the last novel in this collection. So you have Gods in Darkness, copyright 2002 by the estate of Karl Edward Wagner. The cover art is by Ken Kelly. And you can see it's a beautifully bound book. The end papers have this gorgeous looking map. It wasn't the author's map, by the way, just so you know. Some people don't like maps in fantasy novels. So it says copyright for Bloodstone. The copyright for Bloodstone is 1975 by the estate. Dark Crusade, copyright 1976. And Darkness Weaves is a corrected text, as I mentioned earlier, and its copyright is 1978. All right, so that's the first novel, Bloodstone. The next novel in the series is this one, and it's called Dark Crusade. And Dark Crusade is a very interesting novel. It has elements of science fiction to a lesser extent, but more sword and sorcery fantasy to a larger extent. So Cain arrives on the scene of a kingdom in conflict. You have Jarvo's blues against Cain's reds, and the two armies are at civil war. Sort of like you would see in Alexandre Dumas's Three Musketeers novels. You have the Cardinal's Guards, who are usually depicted and described as wearing red, and you have the Musketeers, the King's Musketeers, all dressed in blues with the cross. So it's a hint, I think, to that more than anything. The amongst all that is this evil character called Orted. Orted unwittingly becomes a hapless pawn of this dark god called Sataki, and Orted becomes Sataki's prophet. And then you have this prophet getting up and making speeches and inspiring people with his, more by sorcery actually than by words, because he doesn't say much. He just gives one sentence and, kill all anti-Satakis. And that's basically how it's described. The god leads Orted and the Sataki horde in this mindless overpowering of these cities. They're not an organized rebellion. They're basically a mindless horde of people that just overrun whole cities. Again, the battle scenes in the story, as in Bloodstone, are realistically described for a novel of outright fantasy. So you know right away how the battle is going between the two sides. Eventually, Cain ends up siding with the Dark Crusaders and against Jarvo for his own reasons, which are never really clearly stated in the novel. There is a scene in the novel where Cain, who had escaped Jarvo's clutches, rides his horse, and the horse's name, by the way, is Angel, by a scene of a massacre. Wagner, as he's describing this scene, does not bother to describe Cain's feelings or even thoughts about what the bloody scene of this bloody massacre. But the reader guesses that this is why Cain sides with Sataki and the Dark Crusaders. So it's an interesting scene and an interesting look, and it leaves you with the reader, with you to assess, well, what's his motives for this? Why is he doing this? Why is Cain siding with Sataki? Is it just to get revenge on Jarvo or what? But you get a sense that he's either looking at the battle scene to see what their failings were, but he realizes what Orted and the Satakis realize is they need organized rebellion, not a mindless horde overrunning city after city. It's an interesting look at how Cain is motivated. And it's an interesting view of the character. Is he really a hero, or is he an anti-hero? It's a bit like Michael Moorcock's Elric. Moorcock himself has said in essays that he prefers to refer to Elric as a hero, not anti-hero. So it's an interesting view that he leaves with the reader. Anyway, I don't want to get into too deep into that. The female leads in the story are also realistically described. One is a conniving and the other is a sympathetic character. Iskedra is the one and Errol is the other. The Dark Crusade, again, is well written, and it even has elements of poetry at times. One of the best sword and sorcery novels I've ever read. The horror scenes are gruesome and to read, and not for people who are really squeamish at seeing the kind of descriptions that are mentioned in the novel. The next novel in the series is this one. That's Darkness Weaves. And as I said at the beginning, Darkness Weaves is a rewrite. This is the paperback version with a beautiful cover by Frank Frazetta. And we have, let's see, it does, yeah. Altered abridgment of this novel was published as Darkness Weaves with Many Shades by Powell Publications. Copyright from 1970. So there you go. And Darkness Weaves starts off with the opening prologue of an account of a conflict between a king whose name is Netiston Merrill and his queen, Ephraim. So when Ephraim betrays him, he tortures her horribly to the point where she survives somehow this torture and becomes this gruesome and disfigured being. Eventually, Ephraim learns sorcery and begins to scheme her revenge. She consults this demon god who reveals to her something about Cain and tells her how Cain is the only one who can defeat this king Netiston Merrill. Now, there's a couple of interesting scenes. One interesting scene is the description of Cain in different scenes. He doesn't really, this god, eventually when Ephraim confronts this god about who this Cain really is, the god presents different scenes in Cain's life, visually. So you never really know what these scenes are referring to. But this is the first time that the character Cain is fleshed out, and more of his background is revealed than any of the other novels. This is the first time in Darkness Weaves that it's shown. What ensues after this is the machinations, excuse me, of court intrigue, and incredibly, again, well-described epic battle scenes that are presented in the story. The novel and the characterization, he is a master storyteller. He knows how to tell a good story. And his other booktubers have said and shared, he knows what he's talking about in terms of both editing. He's not a stylist like a stylist like Robert E. Howard, who has more of a classic style of writing. His style is more to the point and honest, in a kind of cinema verite type of honesty. So the title Darkness Weaves, and I'll show this, is interesting. So it's basically from a poem, a fragment attributed to Epirus. It says, "In their castle beyond night gather the gods in darkness, with darkness to pattern man's fate. The colors of darkness are no monotonous hue, for the blackness of evil knows various shades. Full many as evil has names, vengeance and madness, inseparable twins, born together and worshipped as one, nor can gods tell one from his brother. In their castle beyond night gather the gods in darkness, and darkness weaves with many shades." So it's an interesting poem. What it conveys to me is Wagner's love, I think, of H.P. Lovecraft, who was a master, in my view, of horror fiction, horror fantasy fiction. So beautifully well written, a beautiful read. I love the stories. Cain is a mystical swordsman, as many have described, but also the kind of hero who's more out for himself. As I've said in a previous episode on the subject of Karl Edward Wagner, he is a lot like the man with no name, a kind of hero with a code of self-honor more than any other kind of honor. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this little presentation on Karl Edward Wagner's Gods in Darkness, the complete novels of Cain. And it's nicely bound, Nightshade Books, beautiful wraparound dust jacket, as you can see. And always one of the things that I like about the Kane novels is that they were always beautiful covers. Always had these beautiful covers by Frank Frazetta, and I'll show you some of those. Now, Frank Frazetta, this is Darkness Weaves, and this one is a wraparound, as you can see. Beautiful book. This is Bloodstone. Frank Frazetta cover. It's one of the best depictions of Kane. And this is Night Winds, a rough copy of his short stories. And the other novel, Dark Crusade, is I read is in this version. All Frank Frazetta covers. Frank Frazetta, known for his sword and sorcery and many other covers, but mostly for sword and sorcery covers, painted covers. As in this paperback, this is John Jakes. This is John Jakes' Brack the Barbarian, and it's a beautiful cover. It's one of the best sword and sorcery covers, I think. One of the best, if not the best, I've ever seen. And of course, there's this famous Conan cover. This is from Robert E. Howard's Conan. And he also did other types of fantasy. This is The Secret People. This is the first paperback, Lancer paperback of this novel, The Secret People. Originally published in, serialized in newspapers. In the Toronto Star Weekly, is described in the introduction by Wyndham himself. And in The Passing Show, newsprint publication in London. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this presentation on Karl Edward Wagner. And if you did, remember to give me that like. I enjoyed reading the books all in one. I read them through carefully, and I noticed some very slight syntax mistakes in the publication. But again, they don't detract from the story. And as always, give me that thumbs up for like. That always helps the channel, and the channel continues to grow. Thank you so much for all those who are watching my videos. I do enjoy what I collect, and I enjoy what I read. And always, as always, feel free to make your comments. Thank you. Bye.